Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ann Cosgrove, the editor-in-chief of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar today is presented by AkitaBox. We are doing this with video speakers today, so if you do not see us on the top of the screen or the side of your screen, please pull down the gray bar and you should be able to see us all. Thanks again for joining us. So when it comes to building capital budgets for your organization, how often is facilities at the at the top of the list of priorities? If you answered never, then you aren't alone. Facilities are expensive to maintain, and they can often be lumped in with other cost line items that you need to approve. Seen through this lens, it's easy to understand why they have historically struggled to make it to the top of the strategic capital planning priority list. So we're looking forward to a talk about that today. Because while capital planning for facilities typically is full of uncertainty, outdated data, and assumptions, it doesn't have to be that way. And getting this process right is especially critical now as buildings have sat vacant for a year and they begin to ramp up, where the impacts of deferred maintenance and capital projects will start to be felt. And we're sure that many of you in the audience are experiencing that as well. So we're looking forward to some solutions today with our expert panels that you see here. There will be a Q&A session toward the end of the presentation. So please be sure to have your control panel accessible. You can type in your questions in that question box at any time during the presentation, and our speakers will address them at the end. We look forward to that. Also, if you are interested in a continuing education credit for the session, look out for an email from Facility Executive after this presentation. So first, I would like to introduce the speakers that you see on your screen here. We have Juliana Beauvais. She is Research Manager of Enterprise Applications with IDC, a premier global provider of market intelligence, advisory service, and events for the information technology, telecom, and consumer technology markets. We're looking forward to hearing from her today. We also have Matt Mazewski. He is CEO of AkitaBox. They are a leading facility management software and data collection provider dedicated to making data-driven building management easy. And then we also have Josh Lowe. He is co-founder of AkitaBox. So thank you everyone for joining me on the panel. And I'm going to give each of you a moment to introduce yourselves a little further so the audience kind of gets your perspective on the industry, and then we'll jump in. So Juliana, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Ann. My name is Juliana Beauvais, and I am a industry analyst with IDC, and I cover software that companies use for enterprise asset management, facility management, and maintenance, including capital planning. Before this, I was with GE, leading strategy and market research for their smart building and lighting division. And then prior to that, I was with the Boston Consulting Group, helping to create a new global research organization. So I have deep knowledge in market research and technology that I'm bringing to the table today.
Thank you. And Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Ann, and thanks, Juliana. It's great to have you on the call with Josh and myself. My experience with capital management goes way back to my days of working with for Governor Jim Doyle in the great state of Wisconsin. We were located right next to the capital planning team. I did learn how to ask for lots and lots of money and be relatively successful at it as a result of being that close to those executives, and sort of carried it with me. After that, I ran Microsoft's global government business for a good many years, Salesforce.com's global government business as well, and then revisiting back to sort of the capital planning side of things with a short stint at Digital Realty Trust, which is the largest technology real estate investment trust in the world, and got a ton of great experience there, and then moved on to be able to fund my exploration of the startup world, which eventually leads me to the great AkitaBox that Josh helped to co-found, so that we can put the tools that everyone needs from the boiler room all the way up to the boardroom to be able to actually understand strategic capital planning and facilities management across the board.
Thank you. And Josh?
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here and part of this conversation. My background's a little eclectic. I actually have an architecture and urban planning degree. However, really focused on technology, 3D modeling, AR, VR technologies over a decade ago, and realized through my tech consulting with owners and operators of buildings that there was kind of this change happening underneath everything. The contractors started to bring technology to the job site, and it ended up being unused once it got turned over to the owner, and really felt that the industry was ripe for change and a paradigm shift, and saw essentially the same problems being repeated over and over. And we all know the definition of doing the same thing and expecting different results, and really thought that it was time to bring new technology and modernization to the facilities industry to take a completely different spin on the same problem to bring better results through technology and change.
Well, good. Thank you. Thanks for that as well. So we're really looking forward to all of your collective insights. And of course, you out in the audience, please, of course, send your questions in so we can keep the conversation going toward the end. So we'll jump right in. We have some questions that I'd like to pose to you, and welcome, each of you to jump in as you see fit. So the first question you all see here on the screen: why is capital planning so timely? Specifically, I'd like to say, why is this facility capital planning? Why is it such a timely topic for so many organizations right now?
I mute myself and then I'll start. So it's been a long-standing issue, as I'm sure many people on the line know, of trying to decide what your capital plan should be and then making the case for them. It's been really aggravated, if you will, by the disruptions caused by the global COVID-19 pandemic. So even the best laid plans were just that, plans, and probably did not get executed on, maybe not at all, or not as intended in the past 12 months or so. And it's going to hit organizations hard when they get back, let's say, particularly if you start ramping up to fuller occupancy in August, September, and you're running that HVAC system full time. Things are going to break that you didn't expect to break. That deferred maintenance is going to catch up with you. So it's good that we're having this conversation now, because you as facility managers need to think, what can I do immediately and over time and in the long term to get my capital planning back on track?
That's a great answer. Excuse me, great answer, Juliana. One of the interesting things is whenever I've seen large-scale change happen in my career, it's created opportunities for organizations that historically have sort of not been in the driver's seat. And I think I completely agree with Julian that there are a ton of things coming up that are risky for folks if they don't make the right capital planning decisions and then they don't actually do the allocations the correct way. But it also, this change gives a great opportunity for folks who've been suffering under continued and sort of revolving deferred maintenance that continues to build up, to take advantage of the idea that people all of a sudden over the last year learned to do things extremely differently. We all learned to work from home. We all learned to let the dogs out without anyone seeing us do it. You'll see me do that a couple times behind me during the webinar today. We've all learned to take care of our kids and educate them at home as well as at school. We've learned to adopt digital technology about 3 years ahead of everybody else's estimations. And so that openness in terms of a mindset gives facility managers and portfolio managers and folks who manage capital budgets the ability to finally say, hey, that deferred maintenance problem that we had, it's really bad right now. And we've got an opportunity with people not yet returned to their daily work to be able to fully fund, or at least partially fund, or fund well in advance of what they traditionally have done, to make sure that we return to work the way we want to. And the council is to make sure that everyone from facilities engineers to facilities managers to asset managers to portfolio managers all have the same information, so they can talk about risk in an enlightened way and make the case finally that now is the time. Even though we're okay making the switch to Zoom from time to time, we now should be okay in fully funding a deferred maintenance budget so that we can buy down that risk for all of the people that are out there. So I think it's a huge opportunity right now, and capital budgets are a little more flush than operational budgets, so it may be the right opportunity for us to fully fund some of these programs.
Thank you. So I think we're going to see, there we go. Josh, I think you had something to share with us around these stats. Is that correct?
Yeah, and so, really when we talk about the state and why it's important right now and kind of where we're at with facilities data, right? Everybody says it's a priority, but I can't tell you one facilities group where I've walked into their office and said, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable do you feel that your data is accurate? And I get like 5s and 6s, sometimes 2s and 3s, right? And that's a problem. And we talk about why is it right now? Facilities groups have been dealing with the idea of doing more with less for a really long time. And if you walk through our aging infrastructure and go in old boiler rooms, we're hitting kind of this critical mass of things are just going to stop working. And they're going to stop working in mass. And the idea that we've continued to kick the can down the road isn't really going to become an option anymore. Buildings are crumbling. They can't take it. And ultimately, we need to take advantage of this situation we're in now. One of the biggest impediments to collecting good data on your facilities is that they're occupied. We're in prime time to start getting ahead of the game. So as Matt talks about opening up and going back to work the way we want to, we need to be prepared for that and understand what that looks like. If we're going to have less people in a building because, we're just not out and about as much. I mean, Matt talks about, being comfortable being at home. My kids came home for a long weekend a year and a half ago now almost, and are still here, and that's okay, right? But am I going to go back to a physical office again? Probably not in the same way we did before, right? And so we just need to be prepared for that as a group of facilities professionals and start making the right moves.
What's interesting on this slide, Ann, is look at the bottom part, right? The CFOs are not thinking the right way right now because their time horizon, weirdly, and I've got a lot of friends who are CFOs, so I need to be careful what I say, but their time horizon is shorter oftentimes than the facility time horizons that we deal with. We deal with assets that have 20-year life cycles, and folks often have to think within the budget year that they find themselves in. The more we can arm regular folks and the more we can arm sort of middle management to be able to have those conversations with CFOs and drive home the connection to strategic outcomes, the better off everyone is going to be. People don't necessarily understand that let's take the data center industry as an example. The physical plant and the way that chews through energy has an impact on the strategic goals of every data center company on the planet. And yet they still fund it through their capital budgets, and their CFOs are still very interested in controlling that spend instead of unleashing it and creating energy savings across the board. Some of our customers and the prospects we're talking to don't have that problem.
Yeah, Matt. So it's this constant tension.
So it's important that we connect those folks up to the strategic levers that they don't necessarily have right now.
Yeah, and Matt, we're really seeing this tension between executives saying, hey, we want our buildings and our assets to do more for us with being flexible and hybrid and meeting all these new demands. And we want you to spend as little money as possible. You're a line item that we want to minimize. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today is how to overcome that.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to our next slide because you talked about opportunity there in this situation that we've all been in over the past year or so, and also some of the challenges, Matt, you just also touched on as well. So let's jump into the challenges a little bit. What are some of the challenges, building on what we've just talked about, that organizations are being faced with today when it comes to capital planning for their facilities? You talked about the CFO's perspective versus facilities perspective, and what else are you seeing that we can tackle?
I would say my number one impediment is my dogs, who wanted to go out and bark at the world, and they'll probably do that again. I think overarchingly, every customer and prospect that we talk to talks to us about bad data. And the unfortunate part is, as we arm folks with these strategic arguments to be able to go in and have great conversations about how they're driving an ESG agenda for the board, or how the facilities can support capital retention, or how their facilities can support growth in and of itself, that goes fantastic until they go and test the data, and the data is really not as reliable as it could be. And so folks have to be really certain that the data is kept up to date in a real way. Does that mean deploying new technologies? We certainly think it means deploying new technologies. It probably also means deploying things that we don't do across the board yet, including sensors, including robots, including drones in many cases, to make sure that the data is kept up to date as much as physically possible. Because there's nothing worse than making a great strategic argument to your CFO and then find out that the data is at least 2 years old that you're relying on, and she then doesn't push it forward because the data is simply not reliable. So I think the data is one of the big blockers that we've got.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Juliana,
I think, yeah. I mean, I think some of the other areas that we'll go deeper into today are the compliance and sustainability issues. So those are being driven by stakeholders, investors, employees, clients, customers, as well as government regulations and company policy. So making sure that you are, tapping into that and aligning with that as much as possible, and see it as a positive, not as a barrier or just something you have to check the box on. And then I just carving out the time too, right? I mean, you're so busy actually doing the job on a daily basis that making sure you're setting aside time, not just once a year, but ongoing to focus on the bigger picture and the capital planning is going to help you with making that business case down the road. And the technologies and data that Matt's talking about lay the groundwork for that.
I'm mute again. You hit on a great point there, though, right? The idea that they're busy doing their job. And what we don't realize is that because we underfund the facilities groups, they don't have time to plan because they're constantly putting out fires that are started by not funding the facilities groups. And so it's this never-ending cycle of pain, right, that is brought onto those groups. And guess what? They get it done and they don't complain, because typically that's the type of people that they are. They're blue collar, they take pride in what they do, and that leads to the typical challenge of they also aren't used to having technology tools, right? They've always carried the tool belt with them, and they just fix stuff and make it run, and are taken for granted in that landscape. And I think the other thing we don't realize as kind of facilities group or culture is that the idea of the stuff that's being put into buildings now is crazy compared to even 25 years ago. I mean, imagine the fact that actually breathing fresh air makes people work better, right? Like the problems that a facility solves for. So the idea that you shouldn't be putting priority behind the capital spend and not just looking at it as a cost line, but a productivity line, that's changing. And the C-suites and the executives need to understand the value that your facility and your facilities groups actually bring to the bottom line.
Okay, so then what's the ideal state for capital planning? How do you suggest folks start to begin getting there?
So that's tough, right? And the real answer is start getting better data, right? Start. Like just sitting there going, yeah, we really don't have good control of this, and we just spend when things break. Just changing and having a shift in attitude is a good place to start, right? Giving your facilities managers and folks on the ground tools to give you a feedback loop. I can't tell you how many times you go and talk to the technician and they're like, yeah, I fix this stupid thing 3 times a month, and I keep telling people it's an issue, and nobody listens to me, right? And nobody listens because the tools aren't in place to pass that information up, to take action on what your boots on the ground are seeing. And everybody's like, well, our facilities people don't like technology. Okay, no, they don't like not being part of the conversation. They don't like not being consulted before you build a new building and you hand them a bunch of stuff that they know breaks all the time, right? And so engaging them in a meaningful way, not just in operations, but if you're a group that constantly buys or builds, how are you using the data that you have in existing facilities to make sure that you're not putting problematic assets that are going to end up costing you more money over the life cycle? And that's one thing that I think the ideal state is that you're making decisions early, whether you're replacing a boiler or you're speccing one out for new construction. You're using the data that says this one will cost you less money over time. We have to remember that only 12 to 15% of a building's true cost is spent during construction. And so a lot of times, right, they're being penny wise, dollar foolish, and not using that long-term data to their advantage.
One of the things that we also oftentimes, I view what we do on a day-to-day basis, like Josh and I were on a call at 6 this morning talking to a potential client on the East Coast as a translator for the capital. We had the capital planning department on the call, and what we were talking about was the way in which engineering facilities management groups speak their language to people who have no idea what they're talking about, and the people on finances side or capital management side who don't understand butkus about how a facility actually works. And there needs to be something in between that actually tells people, all right, so here's what an FCI is. Here's what that number means to you in terms of how well situated your facilities are. But on the other axis, we're going to put things that your board has told you, your county board or your governor's office or your school board or your board of directors have told you are important to you. Maybe energy consumption, maybe sustainability is the goal that you need to have. And so we're going to tell you in your language. The facilities folks are going to speak in the language of finance about what it is that they need to have accomplished. So the frustration of incessantly saying this is going to have a bad outcome is translated into terms that finance people can do something with. And interesting, Josh does focus on, I love that about you, Josh, focuses on cost an awful lot. I used to, at Digital Realty, I was involved with transactions of actual facilities. And so what I focus on when I'm talking to a chief investment officer is the value, the NOI increases in that building when you take care of deferred maintenance. So if you're looking to trade a building and you want to get a low cap rate, the way for you to do that is fully fund your deferred maintenance that's on the boards, and you will get more money when you sell that building than you would before doing it the right way.
All right, thank you, Matt. So then, Juliana, I'll put this question to you. I just kind of building on this area that we're talking about. If capital planning is a known issue, and we've talked about some of the benefits that obviously come about from proper capital planning, so why is it still a struggle for so many organizations today, in your view?
Yeah, I think we've hit on them. It's the data, it's the organizational issues, it's addressing the needs from the equipment and the technicians all the way up to the boards, and then knowing which technology to deploy. And so those are some of the things we're going to talk about. So if we want to transition to the first area, the connected data slide, please. And so we've talked a lot about data here, and there's many different kinds of data and a lot of things that you can do with it. So, first I would say you got to create that baseline with digitalizing your work orders, automating and capturing those performance metrics, the mean time between failures, first time fix rates, all of that should be captured in ideally a cloud base system that third-party contractors, technicians, admins, managers can all access from desktop or mobile. So everybody's got that foundational data, and you've gotten, as Matt and Josh were saying, you're going from I feel like a 5 about my data to I feel like at least an 8, about my data, because this is so important. It is only going to get worse. It's compounding. 37% of organizations told IDC that our physical workplaces will become increasingly instrumented, interconnected, and intelligent. This is one of the top areas coming out of COVID-19 as a permanent change. And when I see that, I say, oh man, that's more data. So if you don't even have your basic, work orders and workflows and equipment information in a digital form, you're going to be really overwhelmed when you start getting additional kinds of data streams around occupancy and the way people are using the buildings. And it's going to become top down. It's becoming a board level issue. We asked IT purchase decision makers and line of business practitioners, what are the most important strategic areas for your board? And the second one was apply technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning to improve decision making. So, what does this mean for you? It means, like, how can I apply, at least maybe with a pilot or a small scale, to understand better anomalies in my operations? Which manufacturer's equipment is failing more often? Which things are costing me more money to repair? And so it's really taking that gut feel that the technician already has and applying some methodology to your data to support that with evidence that you can bring to people and say, we tracked this, we understand it, and these are our recommendations. This is what we do with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a couple of good points there, especially with connected data and everything changing, right? I mean, things that we used to think were a good idea to do preventative maintenance on because it extended the life of the asset, we're finding actually doesn't extend the life of the asset. We're finding that the labor costs, right? So that's why connecting all of your information from work orders to IoT to understand that at some point your labor costs on certain items exceeds the cost of replacement. And so changing strategies based upon the real data is where we need to start driving to in order to make sure that every hour spent, every dollar spent is bringing ROI back to the organization and isn't just wasted because somebody told me it was a good idea to go check that pump that cost me $150 all in to replace, and I cost the company $75 to be out there 2 hours a month, right? That's where we need to start using the data and making sure that we're making those not only data-driven decisions, but ROI-based decisions.
I think the first step should be for IDC to promote Juliana. I think that's clearly the first step in getting people to truly understand what's going on here. But interesting, we've got to look at the data that we even already rely on. And I'll keep firms' names out of this, but oftentimes for replacement cost, we'll use industry averages and sort of regional averages and sort of trademark averages and data that is, I would say, less than accurate just from an industry perspective, but it's not your data. And so you're drawing conclusions based upon averages, based upon really surveys that are out there, and they're the best that we can do, at least the best that we used to be able to do. But if you're able to connect all of this data that you're collecting from whatever CMMS that you have, all of those work orders, all of those failed inspections, all of those methods of procedure that have been either passed or not passed, and you are helping to augment that assumption of industry averages to get you to truly connected data, so that you may have a particular manufacturer's air handling unit and it may last in general 10 or 15 years, But this one has been on a preventive maintenance schedule that's fantastic and has had the attention that it needs, and it's passed every one of its inspections. And therefore, you can put your capital reserves out by 2 years because you think that one's going to last longer. And the same in the other. I tend to be a positive person, so I try not to use the negative side of that, which is, hey, you know, this hot water heater, you know, has had 15 reactive work orders placed against it in the last 6 months. I got news for you, it's not going to last 7 years, and you probably should replace it right away. But we treat data still in silos, and so what we need to do is break down those silos and have work orders directly work with capital management so that we understand what's going on, and work with the data feeds that we get external to those systems to augment them and give you a view of your data, not just industry data.
Okay, thank you. So, Juliana, did you have an additional comment?
No, I think let's move on to the next slide.
Sure. I was going to say,
great
next
transition.
Okay, so next step 2, because we're talking about 5 steps here, drive sustainable outcomes. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so
Juliana.
I was going to say, I think Matt set it up. I'm just going to hit it a little bit that more people care about that darn hot water heater now than ever before. People that you might think have no business caring, but you know, this is the world that we're in now, where someone's going to ask, do you have a green hot water heater? Do we go with a tankless? Do we, you know, how old is it? How much energy is it using, right? And why are these things mattering to organizations now? You know, you sat in your office with your storeroom for years doing your thing, and now all of a sudden you've got all kinds of people up in your business, right? Well, it's because the companies are having these really high level initiatives around sustainability, and they're looking for benefits beyond just, you know, what we're doing here in maintenance and facility management and capital planning. So people are looking for, from their sustainability initiatives, how do I improve my green building ranking, right? And we've had LEED for years. How do I attract new customers and keep existing customers with my sustainability story? Investors are huge with, you know, pockets of money that are available for people who meet certain investment criteria, better able to attract top talent and new hires. You know, people care. Some people care about the company they work for and what they're doing from a sustainability perspective. So this is just to try to give some broader perspective as to why you might be dealing with some of these issues. And we have on the next slide, we'll get into a little more of some of the compliance and the specific initiatives.
I think on the sustainability side, what's interesting, I teach my leadership teams to have short memories, right? That it's sales oftentimes is a very difficult thing, and if you remember the last one that you lost, you're never going to get over it, and you'll never move forward. Same thing here, right? Facilities groups have been sort of on the bottom of the heap for so long that even when something obvious comes up, they're like, no, I'm not doing that again. Like the last time we made a proposal on sustainability, we got shot down 5 times from Sunday. I've not seen a time in recent history where public pressure and the investment community, boards of directors, and regulators, and the nonprofit world, right? So Greenpeace and energy consumers have got an interesting relationship. Everyone seems to be pushing towards similarly situated goals. So if we can convince the facilities folks who have been sort of beaten down and beaten into submission for so long to have short memories and to come back and say the opportunities in front of us, to use, I try not to use sports metaphors, but it's like a running back who finally sees that gap open up and they have to hit it when it's open. It's open right now. And so I would challenge everyone that's inside of a facilities group that has got a sustainability set of goals that they're hearing about, take that as the opportunity to hit the gap and do something special.
Yeah.
Muted again.
Josh, I think you're
My
on
dog's
mute.
barking, so I keep muting. You know, to add on to that, I think it's a little bit of, we're also seeing all that, right? So not only does it make sense financially, right? We can show savings across the board. I think it's more about, you know, resiliency, right? We need to take the look at sustainability and add the word resiliency to it. And nothing was more apparent to that than the disaster we saw in Texas with the blackouts and the winter storm, right? I live in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, on a farm. I have a generator that powers my house. Guess what? When I realized how much energy my light bulb sucked, I quickly switched to LED because now my generator could power my whole house as opposed to powering one room's light bulbs. And so everybody needs to think about this. There's lots of different factors coming into play, but it's not just energy savings, it's also the resiliency and making sure that we can give our aging infrastructure and grid a break where we can in order to move into the future on the right foot.
Yeah, I think that's a great transition. And if you want to take us to next.
Sure, yes. So we have connect the data, drive sustainable solutions, and our step 3 to greater capital planning is to focus on compliance. So let's talk about that a little bit. Building off the need to drive sustainability, how does compliance play a role in that, Juliana?
Yeah, so the last slide we're talking about how there's kind of a grassroots effort or some other factors that are driving that, sustainability. Here we're seeing that there are also going to be compliance issues, whether they're with government regulations or company policy, that are going to have a profound impact on organizations. And if you can tap into these, as Matt was saying, these larger ESG initiatives and align what you're doing. So show when I put forth this capital plan and I am making these specific recommendations, it is this thing is going to further our carbon reduction, or it's going to help with our switch from fossil fuel, or it relates to the circular economy, or I can link this to a financial indicator. And that's going to really get the attention of the people who have to sign off on it and make those final decisions. So it's really, really critical, I think. And you might also find pockets of money tied to these new ESG initiatives that you could get to help with some of this, getting through some of this deferred maintenance, because you've now demonstrated that it directly relates to things that matter to high-level decision makers right now.
Yeah, that's a good point, Juliana. We talk on our leadership team all the time about the critical needs that are inside some of our customers and the critical needs that are inside some of the folks who aren't yet customers but will be soon. And nothing speaks critical need like regulation, or at least regulatory saber rattling. If there's not regulation, it's on the horizon. And so you've got a choice. You can either wait for it to come and pay the increased rate to get it done, or you can get it done now at a discounted rate and be ahead of the curve and be able to use that to market your services, sell at a higher price point, and be more successful as an organization. And the more people start to view compliance that way, the better off we're going to be. I think everyone views it as sort of a negative, hey, we got to do this again, the government's making us do that, or the board is making us do these things from an ESG perspective. Instead, take it as an opportunity, right? You've got an opportunity. The organization has got a critical need. That means that funding will be easier to come by than the uphill slog that facilities groups have always had to try to get money to fix the things that need fixing.
Well, thank you for that. So, and I see here on the slides, most or all of the items are around very important things that we're talking about, environmental and energy compliance, things like that. So I want to ask you, how has the COVID-19 pandemic accelerated this focus on compliance? What have you seen, whether it's some of the items that we see here on the slide or otherwise?
So the other compliance area that, depending on your industry, may or may not have been strongly on your radar before is health and safety. And now it has a new meaning beyond kind of your traditional EHS, slip and fall, OSHA, environmental factors. It now reaches well into common objects that people are touching, air circulation, how close in proximity people are to each other. And some of these things are going to stay. They're going to be with us for a while, post-vaccine or post-pandemic, because it just makes sense to keep the workforce, the customers healthier. And we expect to see, we're already seeing some of it, like healthy building accreditations and programs, similar to what we've had on the energy side. So again, the more that you can think about that now and get out in front of that, the better poised you'll be to jump on those things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We're going to see the lead that folks had on the energy side. Whenever you see Jennifer Lopez and Lady Gaga get on a commercial and talk about clean buildings, you know that there's something coming down the road, and you should take it as an opportunity to get out in front of it. Like when ultimately inside the world of places like commercial real estate, I know when I was at Digital Realty Trust, we didn't view LEED as an option. LEED was a starting point for us. We had to be LEED certified, and it was a question of what level we would be certified in any particular place. That's what's going to happen going forward. When COVID-19 first hit last year, we reacted by giving away an awful lot of things that our healthcare clients needed: respirator tracking, ventilator tracking, being able to resize your rooms to maximize COVID beds. We gave that stuff away, but we also challenged the leadership team to think about what would these people need long term as a result of this. We didn't know how long it would last, but we didn't think it would be temporary. There were going to be some permanent things that came out of that. And I still think we're getting closer to understanding that, but we're not quite there yet. But again, it's another great opportunity. Funding those things gives you the ability to hit your strategic goals as well as your health and safety goals. I'm glad Juliana brought that up.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to step 4 in this journey to better capital planning. And we've talked a lot so far about data, which of course is very important in decision making. But what about other areas that our viewers can focus on to improve strategic capital planning as they move through this process?
Yeah, and Josh, I think you have some good thoughts on this. I just kind of put together a nice little graphic for you. But you've got to connect all the way from the people on site at the equipment in the field who have that real knowledge about what's happening on a day-to-day basis, through the layers of management into finance, and then up into making that story for the executives and the boards.
Oops, my dogs were barking again. And I'll learn one of these times to do it right away. It's about connecting. We talk about connected data. I think connecting teams is as important, but we can't start to connect those teams till we're connecting data, right? And solving for problems, and we pride ourselves on building solutions that aren't solving today's problems. They are, but we're looking at what problems are coming that we don't know are coming yet, and making sure the data is flexible enough to meet those challenges and be able to provide insights. And I can give you an example specifically with our healthcare clients. And you can see the natural transition over time, but even more so now. Like if I went into and I used to do specifically healthcare construction, you went into some of those older aging hospitals, and man, I swear, if you sent me into one of those places, I'd probably get sicker just from being in that environment of white, sterile, you just didn't feel like it was a place you could recover. And now moving to facilities that are designed like Hilton's. Our youngest son, the last time we were in for that, you felt like you were in a maybe not 5-star, but at least 4-star hotel room with the amenities, and the food was better, right? Like they're providing good things, and that all starts with synchronizing teams and understanding the impact that each team has on the other. And ultimately, for the C-suite and the people who care about the bottom line, adds to profitability, right? And they all of a sudden understand that with choices in healthcare, if I have a choice of where I'm going to go to the place that makes me feel like I can recover and get better, not the place that I feel like you sent me to die, right? And so I think that synchronization of teams helps the facilities people, right? Because again, these are people who are prideful and love what they do, and do it because they want people to have a clean, good place to come every day. Think about the joy and the pride, extra pride you're going to bring to their job if they know that by responding a little bit quicker or by doing something a little bit better, they're helping somebody recover, which is bringing more patients in and ultimately making the business that they work for more profitable. That's really important as we move into the future of cultivating data and teams.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. So let's move to 5, and then we'll take some questions as we get toward the end of the hour here. So step 5, deploy technology deliberately. So what is meant by that?
Yeah, so I deliberately put deliberately in there for a reason. So it's not about deploying tech for tech's sake. But on the flip side, I hear from a lot of people in this industry that I speak to on an ongoing basis that it's all bells and whistles or marketing gimmicks. And there's some skepticism over these buzzwords and the real value of this technology. So my kind of remit to you is to say that let's just not dismiss it, and let's look at my particular organization and situation and how it can help me. So that's what I mean by deliberate is you're not doing it just because it's there and you think you should, but you're not ignoring it just because you're skeptical. You are assessing where are the areas that my organization struggles with the most. What are the things we do most frequently? Where are the things where we feel like we're still spending more time than we need to? Where do we feel like we could be getting better insights but we're not? Where our workflows still have manual processes? Sit down and have those conversations, and you'll pretty readily start seeing these are areas where technology might help us. And on this slide, I just have some data from a survey we did last year that looked at what are companies already using for enterprise asset management and what did they plan to use. And so some of these might be like, I don't think 27% of companies have like a large scale drone program, but maybe they're using a couple of drones for one use case or on one site where they, instead of going out and doing the inspection once a year, they're able to do it more frequently and expensively. And that data is critical to infrastructure status and those capital plans.
So gotta chime in again with sort of promote Juliana. She's dead on in terms of the use of the word deliberately is hugely important. Even boards, like when we seek funding, if we seek funding and we come with buzzwords, we don't get it, right? They're like, there's, everyone's saying that doesn't mean anything. I don't know what you're doing. But we talk about it. We always ask, what's the purpose behind? We've got a great innovation lead, and Gladys Singh, formerly from Booz Allen Hamilton, who has incredible ideas about all of this stuff, and she always digs sort of one level deeper. So we deploy drones. We do it on a regular basis. But to give you an example, in our work with the United States Air Force, we did it to keep airmen safe as opposed to going on roofs to figure out whether the facility was in a good condition or not. We're able to do that with drones and make sure that those individual warfighters are kept safe and able to focus on things that are a little more critical than making sure that the roof is in operating condition, when we can do that in a much safer way for the engineers. In terms of robotics, we've dealt with what I call the 7-year FCA cycle, right? It's 7 years, 5 years, however infrequently facility condition assessments are done, the data is always a little too old, and that can be solved almost immediately. I won't use the robot's name, but there's a number of robotic things out there that would allow you to take, in essence, the same 360-degree picture every day from exactly the same spot and automate through AI and ML the actual condition of those assets and the degradation and how fast it's happening. And we don't need to take up individual facility engineers' time to do that. And then the last piece is sort of on IoT. IoT's been out for a long time, but now it's being deployed towards end goals. And when we talk about the idea to have a more full automation in what we do at AkitaBox, it is purposefully to make sure that those facilities managers and engineers can do the great and strategic work that they've always wanted to be doing. to be able to work on the vitally important things, as opposed to simply taking note that, yeah, that rust looks worse today than it did last week. We can have machines do that work. And when we do that and we tie it back to specific things that are gains for the CFO and the CEO and the board of directors, that's the magical combination. So this is a great slide too.
Yeah, and to add on that digital twin, right? You know, watching that grow, and I take full responsibility, right? I was part of the, I think what turned into fear mongering, even though it wasn't intended that way, of being afraid of digital twins, because we were out there showing the future of what it could be, right? It's fully designed 3D models that are clash coordinated before construction, so that everything goes in and is installed seamlessly. And not only is it installed seamlessly, but we talk to the facility manager ahead of time to know how much access they need to get to certain things that they need to fix, so that that's available. And then, hey, we're going to give you augmented reality, you know, Google Glass, whatever it might be, right? HoloLens in the field, and you're going to be able to see through walls. And all that people saw, and trust me, this is all attainable, right? However, like one of my favorite quotes, right, is the future is here, it's just unevenly distributed. Like this falls right into that in terms of, I don't want people to see the term digital twin and think of that unattainable thing for them. Digital twins are a spectrum. There is a starting point, and at every step of the way, there is value to be gained. But if you're a facility manager sitting with an existing infrastructure, mapping every single pipe that's hidden behind the wall to get to that unattainable thing, nobody could afford, right? You may as well tear the building down and build it back brand new to do that. And so having people understand that there are steps that can be made. However, new construction, start thinking about what you're asking for and how it's going to be turned over. And are you using a system today that can handle ingesting that type of data? And if you're not using a system that can ingest that type of data, it may be time to start looking for new solutions so that you can move into the future, right, on solid footing and knowing where you're going from where you've been.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you everyone for that. That is great. We have the 5 steps there, and I think we've covered a lot of ground, and we do have time for several questions. I do want to let everyone in the audience know, if you have questions, first of all, we have Juliana, Matt, and Josh's contact information up here, but also any of your questions can be answered offline directly if we don't get to them. So please continue to send them in if you do have some questions. So I'll jump right in for a few. So I'm going to work a little backwards from step 4. We had talked about synchronizing the facilities team. So I'm going to talk about the human aspect of it for a moment. In your view, who should be leading the facility capital planning process? Is it facility leadership? Is it finance? What are you seeing kind of as effective with the organizations you worked with? What have you seen happening even?
Yeah, I can start with that one real quick and kick us off. I mean, the best examples that I see are when they're starting to make those synchronistic teams, right? And you're connecting teams, because ultimately the best capital plans that can be followed through are when the C-suite is on the same page as far as metrics that they're tracking to make financial decisions. So whether it be risk, whether it be, you know, condition, whatever those metrics are, having an agreement from a high level on what the core metrics they're tracking are and what the impact of doing nothing is on their core business, that's when you have the best decisions made, and that's when it truly works, right? You know, we talk about from the boiler room to the boardroom. That's when it truly works best, is when they're all talking about the same metrics.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll jump to another question, which goes to data. And someone had asked, where can we get data on life cycle cost or the remaining life cycle cost of existing infrastructure? But where can we get that data? I'm guessing that means, you know, how to start pulling that out.
I was going to say we have one answer. You can call us up and sign up for AkitaBox, and the capital management application that we launched last year has got not just, it's important, not just that data. We've got really great data partnership with Gordian and RS Means, and we get good data feeds directly from that. But we also have the ability to take that data and clarify it a little bit, again, with the work order history that happens in your environment, with the inspections history that happens in your environment. And we give you a view of sort of both of those realities. This is sort of where the industry number is, and this is where the real number is for you in terms of life cycle, and then in terms of replacement cost. And then I would say do the same thing on the FCA side. I mean, people are very used to doing FCAs in paper-based, still a very paper-based or PDF-based, but it's really a paper-based set of systems. I would take that walk back to make sure that you truly understand the data in your FCA as well, and how that connects to industry-oriented construction costing data and job data as well, and that you don't just take one source. Like with everything else, we've noticed that you bring in one source, you augment it with the reality that you see, and then you come out with an understanding. And that's what I would suggest, whether it's with AkitaBox or it's with somebody else.
Yeah, and I would say the power of your peers as well. So make sure that you're in at least one kind of user group or industry association, and you're attending a virtual event now or a real life event, and engaging in those conversations with your peers as well, because they have a ton of knowledge that they'd be able to share on how the methodologies they use and the sources of their data.
And read facility executive publications. But seriously, we often get great data from the articles that are written. You'd be surprised at what you can get through the great reporting and coverage that happens in FE and elsewhere. Just that we've actually got a wealth of places to go to get information, official data sources, like I said, Gordian, RS Means, and things like that. But also the less, I like Juliana's idea about, the circles that you run in are going to get you real information. And so, go to your IFMA events, be part of your IFMA local chapter, be part of the events that are sponsored by a facility executive, take part in these kind of webinars so that you understand what the real data is that's out there. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone. We do have time for one last question. I'll squeeze it in if someone wants to jump in on this. So, Beck, how does deferred maintenance affect capital budgeting? So, we talked a lot about obviously the realities out there that many in the audience are facing, I'm sure. So, just you want to jump in? How does deferred maintenance affect capital budgeting?
It makes prioritization hard. If you have a $5 million deferred maintenance problem, and you're running a $2 million budget a year, that's hard to catch up with. And so it absolutely has impacts that you're going to need to deal with sooner than later. Now you can continue to kick the can down the road, but that's where the data-driven process works really well, because you can take some of that deferred maintenance and realize that based on industry standards, this should have been replaced 10 years ago. Guess what? They maintained it well. They oiled it every day. They did stuff like that. I always tell people I have a Victory Ford tractor sitting out from the 40s, in my garage, and it runs like it did the day it was built on the factory. And that's not a high risk, right? Where some of your other deferred maintenance might be a high risk. So dealing with it from the data side really helps you kind of get over that hump, but it's always going to be a problem until you deal with it.
I've been involved in a lot of change programs in my life, political and non-political, and the only way to take on large systemic challenges is to make progress each and every day. And the way not to do that is to have your head in the sand. Josh and I will keep names out of this, but Josh and I unsuccessfully pitched a large university system that had an $800 million deferred maintenance backlog, and they kicked the can down the road. And sure enough, this year they have a $1.2 billion deferred maintenance backlog. It doesn't get better by sticking your head in the sand. The only way that you can solve the problems, both in society as well as in your facilities, is to have your eyes wide open, deal with some harsh realities, bite the bullet, and every day. An old friend of mine gave me advice a long time ago that if you make progress each and every day, even if it's small progress, eventually you'll start moving that mountain.
Yes, agreed. And one last tidbit would just be beware of the sunk cost problem that we all face. Just because you spent some money on something doesn't mean that you should keep spending money on something. So try and separate those decisions about what you have spent in the past to get to where you are with what makes sense with allocating your limited resources moving forward.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll close it out. Thank you so much, everyone. Juliana, Matt, and Josh, really appreciate your time today and your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
AkitaBox for sponsoring this webinar, and of course to our audience for attending and for your attention. Please take a look out in your email box shortly for a email from AkitaBox, and we'll have a recording of today's talk if you'd like to review it, along with their ebook, which is The Future of Capital Planning. It'll be a great resource to kind of supplement what you've heard here and dig a little deeper, dive a little further towards some solutions. So please look out for that from AkitaBox. Also, a recording of this webinar will be made available on our magazine's website in the near future, and that's facilityexecutive.com. So thank you again, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.